I'd never experienced anything that bad before. Like, I would go into work and I'd be shaking, like visibly shaking.
If I wouldn't say it to a friend, why am I saying it to me? Welcome to another episode of the Waffle Shop podcast. Today I'm joined by what I can tell already is probably going to be one of my new favourite people. It's
Thanks.
hypnotherapist and entrepreneur and everything else in between. It's Ellie James.
Hi.
Welcome to the Waffle Shop.
Thank you.
Thank you for travelling.
inviting me. Thank you. It was honestly such a pleasure.
It's weird. I'm still, as you probably hear it in my voice, I'm still very giddy that people are like coming here because I feel like this has been like my little kind of safe place for so long.
Yeah.
But not even so long. We've only been open like a couple of months, but like now it's like
It's amazing, honestly. I'm obsessed with this place.
it's cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a nice place. I love it.
Every now and again I just get myself like a little pat on the back, like, oh, this is nice, isn't it?
Reality check.
Yeah. And then people come in and they're like, oh my god, you want to talk to me? It's great. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm really good. Do you know what? It's been so much. It's been such a big journey in such a short space of time.
Yeah.
And you know, I started my hypnotherapy journey because I had really bad anxiety, and I think it completely changed things for me in a matter of like weeks. You know, like,
Wow.
literally after 2 sessions, I was like, what's happened to my thoughts? Like,
Yeah.
where is all the overthinking going? And I was really struggling at the time with like a relationship and like work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think now I can't really believe like things change so quickly,
Yeah.
like literally change so quickly. So yeah, I'm just
Good.
moving
Good,
on,
yeah.
moving onwards and
It's right,
upwards.
you can hear that
basically.
in your voice. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm proud of it. I don't know what this was. But I do. Before we dive into that, I do something called the weekly waffle on the show, which is something quite petty that gets on my nerves. That once I've spoken about with my guest, it's supposed to make me feel better.
Okay.
I'm starting to realize that as I'm having these conversations that the stuff isn't actually that petty. It's just me moaning about myself.
Okay, I love that. I love it.
But one of them which I picked today, like specifically,
All right.
because one of your posts that you put out on social media, it really resonated with me.
Okay.
And it's something, especially lately, I've been giving myself such a hard time for. And it's the self-sabotage.
Oh my God.
And it is getting to a point now where like it's like I'm almost having like an internal argument with myself because I'm in this kind of state of mind where if I wouldn't say it to a friend, why am I saying it to me?
Why are you saying it to yourself?
Yeah. And it's just winding me up. And I just thought, do you know what? I'm going to run it past Ellie because I feel like if there's anyone to talk to this kind of stuff about,
Do you
it'd be
know
you.
what? I think a lot of it is in the control of your subconscious. So your subconscious is self-sabotaging you. It's not a conscious thing you're doing. You're just reverting to it because
Yeah.
it's a self-belief that you've developed over time. And so if you imagine like your subconscious every single day takes on board like, you know, images, sounds, smells, emotions from situations that you're put in, and then those emotions don't leave you unless you deal with them, you heal from them. They don't leave you. You develop self-beliefs throughout, like from a child up until like, you know, forever,
Yeah.
basically, you know, and they're subconscious beliefs. So I think self-sabotage is a subconscious thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's horrible, but you know, it did make me laugh because when I was reading like your posts around and like your conversation around self-sabotage, you mentioned the whole music thing, and obviously we talk about music quite a lot on the show, and it was that kind of like I never ever remember learning the words
No.
to Mr. Brightside, but for some reason I could recite them like that.
Everything. Yeah.
And it wasn't until I read like the post about like my subconscious and like, obviously like being around that kind of song, like growing up, or you know, at every party that I've ever been at, even though I might not be listening to the song, I'm taking it in.
You are, yeah. And you absorb everything. It's like your mind records everything
Yeah.
every single day. So you've probably had a moment where you've like almost smelt something and it's taken you right back to your childhood.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, I haven't seen that in years. Like, that's amazing. But that's how your mind works. You know, it matches up memories with sounds, smells, and that's why you can be triggered. So there's like obviously people who get PTSD, they're triggered from a
Yeah.
sound, and it will take them back to that horrific memory that they've got trauma
Yeah.
with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you hear it a lot with like perfumes and aftershaves, don't you? In that kind
Oh
of
yeah, 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 yeah,
subject that it
yeah,
like really, and to be fair, even something as simple as kind of like an alcoholic drink that you might have had on holiday
yeah,
or a certain shot or something like
yeah.
that, it almost takes you back to that like disgusting feeling of like, oh, I can't
That's
believe
why
I've
you're
just,
like, I can't
yeah,
drink
like I
that
can't do that
again.
again.
Yeah.
Um,
But I remember the smell of my year two teacher's perfume. That's how
wow,
much your subconscious records. And I smelt it one day and I was like, I know that smell. And I was like, oh my God, it's my
she's
teacher.
here.
She's here. But yeah, it's just
We're basically
incredible.
sponges.
We are, we
Literally,
are.
we're
I mean, if
just
you think about it, obviously kids, they're even more sponges because they're like bigger sponges because
because they don't have jobs.
and that, absolutely,
I
absolutely,
don't
and
know
that's
how
why I
easy
don't
they've
have
got it.
kids. But but yeah, no, like it's incredible how your mind works and how it stores all that information, and you can literally within seconds access that memory. And that's kind of what hypnotherapy is all
Mm.
about. So I've probably gone off
No,
topic
it's okay.
now, but
Quickly before we dive into the hypnotherapy, is there anything that gets on your nerves that you would like to get
definitely.
off your chest?
Do you know what really gets on my nerves? Right, two things. Is it all right to have two things?
Absolutely.
All right. One of them is bucket hats. Only because all I think of is, Bill and Ben, the flower pot men. That's what I
Yeah.
think. Every time I see them, I'm like, oh, I just want to punch you in the face. That sounds really bad. The
You know what? Every other person who has ever come on this show, it's like slow walkers,
oh,
traffic, and
really?
you're just like straight in there. I don't even think you thought about
Sorry,
that.
it's really
Like bucket
savage.
hats.
Sorry to the bucket hats out there, but yeah. And the other thing is actually having to not wear pajamas. Like pajamas are the best thing invented, and the fact that you have to get dressed and it's not socially acceptable to just
Yeah.
go out in your pajamas.
Or is it though? Because I feel like everything could be a pajama, except for jeans. People who chill out in
Well,
jeans are
jeans definitely are
weird.
not a pajama.
Yeah.
Too much chafing going on.
Yeah. This took quite a turn. How did your hypnotherapy journey start? 'Cause you mentioned about the kind of it helping you when you needed it. What kind of happened? Obviously, feel free to share whatever you want or not at all. What that journey kind of looked like to get to that point of needing hypnotherapy.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a couple of years ago, so quite a short space of time ago, really. During lockdown, I had like quite a traumatic, I suppose, time at work
Yeah.
where it was a really high pressure job. I can't really, delve into
Yeah.
more
Yeah. Yeah.
details, but it was very high pressured, and there was a lot of expectation for me to know what I was doing without really actually having started and got into the job,
Mm.
because we were in lockdown, like you're working from home. And so I didn't really have anyone to kind of like communicate with and say, am I doing this right? I don't really know
Mm.
if I'm doing this right. So there was no guidance. And then I think that took, like, I suppose in lockdown, you just, everything becomes your center focus. There's
Well, it
nothing
was a
else to do.
minefield though, wasn't it? Because it was those tiny, not that it was a tiny thing, but like, like everything was heightened.
It literally,
Like we
yeah.
were so isolated and shut off anyway. Like we weren't even able to like go and visit parents or like family, friends, whatever it might have been. But then when it comes to the work thing, you're so used to kind of just getting up off your desk, go and have a conversation. And then,
Yeah.
so if you haven't got that kind of support network there, you're
Yeah.
bound to like,
Yeah, and I mean, it was just a whole new world to deal with at home,
mhm,
in my flat at the time. And then I had a relationship which arguably, just a classic toxic relationship
yeah.
really. and all of it built up, and that's what I would say was, something that built up this
Mhm.
really, really high pressure anxiety. And when I say anxiety, like, I'd never experienced anything that bad before. Like, I would go into work and I'd be shaking, like visibly shaking, and I genuinely think, oh my god, people must think that I'm like an alcoholic,
Yeah.
or that, like, I don't know, I'm doing drugs or something at
Yeah.
work, because I just can't stop
But you
shaking.
can't explain it until you actually experience it though, can you?
Literally,
Because,
no.
like, if you didn't know or, like, lived it, I'd be like, "Oh god, like, what's she doing?" kind of thing.
Yeah,
But it is
yeah,
that kind of thing, and then from a similar thing, like, until I had, like, the physical symptoms of anxiety, I
yeah,
was like, "Oh my god," you almost it makes it more anxiety inducing
yeah.
because now I'm
It
now
is.
worried about what everyone else is gonna
I'm
think
worried
about that
about,
I'm
yeah,
worried.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, no, that was just, I started to realize people are noticing,
Yeah.
and I think it was the fact, like, I would get up in the morning and think, I'm just so exhausted, like, I can't deal with these thoughts
Mm.
anymore. It's the overthinking and the shaking, the napping all the time
Yeah.
because I'm like exhausted. Yeah, so, and one thing I knew was that I was having very irrational thoughts, like,
Mhm.
around my relationship, and I just, there was a lot that was there.
Yeah.
It was like, this isn't rational, and I knew that, but it was really hard to reason
Mm.
with myself. So I was actually on the train to work, and I decided to do a bit of googling, as you do. I was thinking, what alternative therapies are there for anxiety, right? Because as a child, I hadn't had anxiety. I had, like, a mild depression,
Yeah.
which was, in my teens, like a really long time ago. And the only experience that I'd had of, like, therapy was CBT, or
Mhm.
like, counseling,
Yeah. Well, there's the
and
standard kind
the
of
standard
yeah,
stuff,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And I think at that point, I kind of realized, like, oh my god, I need something that's going to help me quick, like, fast, because I can't deal with this anymore.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
and I'd never ever felt like that. And it so I kind of got in touch with this guy called Mark, and I'm just doing a Google search. His hypnotherapy came up. And I thought, I don't really know what it's about.
Mm.
Like, let's look into it. And I mean, I did the first session, and at the time, I was thinking it's a lot of money for me to pay up front, and I was thinking, but I will do anything if there's a
Yeah,
slightest chance that I'm going to feel better. So, yeah, I paid, obviously, and then did one session, and I felt like there was emotion coming out, but,
yeah,
like, during the week. And then the following session, I think it was about halfway through the week, the following week, and I just had this moment where I was like, a pin drop moment, like, oh my god, where have my thoughts gone? Like, where's the overthinking gone? Why do I not care that my boss is, like, shouting at me
yeah.
about something or other? This is just not me. Like, what's happened to me?
And
Um,
there was nothing that kind of triggered that, or it was literally just something that just like, "Oh,
it was
okay."
a like a pin drop
Yeah.
stop moment. And I remember I was walking along somewhere in the street, and I remember thinking, what, like, this has taken up my
You could hear
day
your voice like, "Oh,
24 hours a day. Like, for like,
wow."
or however long you're awake.
Yeah.
Well, in my case, it was probably about 3 hours,
Yeah.
but, it was taking up my whole day, thinking, like, on overdrive. So I think really it was a reality check for me. I was like, wow, what's happened? Like,
Yeah.
this is different. And from that point onwards, I was like, I just got to get my hands on this. Like, what's happened to me,
Yeah.
Um, but it just shows you the power of your own mind, right? Because there's a lot locked up there that you don't know is up there. And yeah, I explain it to people, like, you have, if you imagine your mind as like a Coke can, and you, over time, you're subject to, like, trauma. So, for example, you might go through a breakup, or you might go through bereavements and things like that. And when you shake that Coke can, and that, trauma builds, so you're shaken up through the trauma builds, and pressure, until you get to the point where you're going to pop. And everyone hits their threshold at some point. So when, you know you hit that point, I would say that's the best point to have hypnotherapy, because you're desperate for change, and people that are desperate for change respond very well to hypnotherapy. um
Why so in these kind of like sessions and stuff, like obviously you said that you'd had like CBT and like the the normal kind of like level of counseling. Was there a different feel to like your first hypnotherapy session, or like, talk me through like a standard kind of session because
God, yeah.
I have no idea, but it is an area that I'm like, well, obviously you see the impact. There's no one that I think that I've experienced who said it doesn't work.
Yeah. So hypnotherapy is not a talking therapy.
Yeah.
So the great thing about it is, and a lot of men really like it because a lot of men don't want to come in and say, I'm not generalizing. That
Mm.
is a general,
Yeah.
like a thing that a lot of men don't want to talk about their problems. They don't want to relive it, and a lot of people don't like, and they sit down and they think you're taking me through the mud, like to get to a point, in counseling,
Yeah.
because they have to talk through it all and relive it all. Um, but hypnotherapy, it will start by me giving a pre-talk. So, what we're doing now is in effect a pre-talk because I'm
Yeah.
explaining to you how your mind works, how subconscious works, um, you know, just all those things that will allow you to go deeper into hypnosis. Um, and the suggestion is there. So I've given you suggestion
Are you
whether you know.
hypnotizing me
No,
now?
no, 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 no,
Just checking.
no. But the
I've got a busy day.
you're like, what's going to happen to me today? But the suggestion's there, right?
Yeah.
And so what hypnosis is very different to a talking therapy because you'll be in a chair and you are not talking to me. I'm doing all the talking and you are in a very, very relaxed, deep state of trance. So you will have actually gone into hypnosis before
Yeah.
and you don't know. You're probably thinking right now, you're like,
Yeah, I'm like, "Oh my
is she
god,
going to
where
take me
is
to hypnosis? No.
this?"
But yeah, like you will have gone into hypnosis before.
Mm.
So if you think about a time, do you drive?
Yeah.
So has there been a time when you were driving along the motorway or something and then you completely zone out?
I do that when I'm walking,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a state of
and I'm like, "Oh my god,
hypnosis.
how did I get here?"
State of
Yeah.
trance, yeah?
Okay.
So your subconscious knows the route from A to B, your regular walk to work, for example, yeah? Your subconscious knows how to get you from A to B, so you don't have to think about it. So you can be completely immersed in this other world in your head, completely not realize that you've walked from A to B and get to work. And that's all in the control of your subconscious. That's how powerful it is, right?
Wow.
So your subconscious does so many wonderful things for you to protect you,
Yeah.
but equally it absorbs all this shit that we don't need. We can get rid of it. Um, but yeah, so you would have been into hypnosis before, you just
Just
haven't
haven't
used it
realized
to your
it.
advantage, basically.
So
So that's a state of trance.
with the, because obviously you said that like obviously we absorb the good and the bad. From a selfish point of view, has, like you said, Fred, like the thoughts just kind of like stopped that one day. Now, using obviously your own experiences and obviously what you do for other people, are you able to kind of manage the stuff that you absorb?
Yeah, I do a lot of self hypnosis and meditation. So like most evenings I'll, and if I've not done it one day or something, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter too much, but generally I have to after, like at the end of the day every
yeah,
day, because yeah, you can't take on everyone else's shit, right?
yeah,
We're energy, you know. You must have been around someone who feels like a complete like energy vampire, just sucks up like all
yes,
your yes,
yes,
unfortunately.
yes,
And when that happens, like that sort of thing can happen in, like in hypnotherapy
yeah,
sessions. I genuinely can feel myself picking up on other people's emotions. So you could be releasing trauma, for example, um, during hypnosis, and I'll kind of go into how that looks. But for like you, when you're in hypnosis, you could release that trauma, and I could feel it, and I could pick up on it.
yeah.
So I could sometimes feel like almost a little bit sad, or like I get goosebumps a lot, and that's why I know something's happening. Um,
That's
so yeah.
weird that you say that about the goosebumps, because if I'm talking about like a good thing or even a bad thing, I literally had it
Really?
about an hour ago. There was a
Really?
guy in here who was recording in the studio, and we were kind of like, well, he was just like wrapping up, and we were having a conversation about it, and he was telling me about the conversation, and I don't know the people he was talking to. I
Yeah.
don't know what the podcast was about. I sat over there with my headphones in, and when he was talking, and he got to a certain point, and I could literally feel it was like someone that,
Goosebumps.
that's that feeling of someone walking over your
Yeah.
grave,
Yeah.
because I was so like, I guess, one, I was obviously interested in what he was saying, but I was like, oh wow, that's powerful. That's
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. It's
Why why
amazing.
why does that happen?
It's energy, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're energy. Like we and how I describe it to people is that you will somewhere in your body, like everyone, you've got energy running around your body,
Yeah.
and you will develop blockages and things like that. So you will have where you have experienced trauma. Think about, I don't want to bring anything up for you here, right? But if you thought about a certain incident that's happened in the
Yeah.
past, and don't do it now, but if you thought about it, you could probably, if you've still got trauma there, you can bring that emotion up. So it might
Yeah.
be somewhere you can feel it in your chest,
Mhm.
or you feel it, some people feel things in the stomach or whatever.
Yeah.
Or it might cause you to grind your teeth or make you feel a bit, I don't like
Yeah.
this. That's triggered by the memory, right? So in hypnosis, we can get rid of the emotional attachment, but still have the memory there. So you can
Wow.
think back and go, oh, that incident, yeah, it was really traumatic, but I'm over it. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Do you remember, like, obviously when you are in that kind of state of trance, as you said, um, do you remember what's being said to you? Or are you that kind of
it tends to go through phases. So
yeah.
people will tune in and tune out, but it doesn't matter. Your subconscious is always listening. How many times have you gone to, like, I don't know, you've gone somewhere and you think, oh, I've seen something like that recently, but you don't know why you've seen it.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, it's a picture on the wall yesterday. It's just subconscious picks things
Does
up.
that, like, play into sorry, you've done you've done it now, you've opened, like,
I'm really,
yeah.
really sorry.
No, 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 it's good, no, but this is genuinely why I wanted to have you on the show, because it's the education part around hypnotherapy
Yeah.
that obviously I don't know unless I have the conversation, but déjà vu,
Yes.
is déjà vu a thing, or is it our subconscious mind kind of repeating things to us? I mean, that's a
People
deep
people
question, but
people believe different
yeah.
things. I mean, I've got my own beliefs around deja
Yeah.
vu. I like to think that there's some kind of past life thing going on there,
Yeah.
right? But subconsciously, yeah, I think scientifically there is
Mm.
something, with your subconscious there. I don't know too much about deja vu, but yeah, I find all that stuff really interesting and
Yeah.
freaky. And I feel like, oh, I've lived this moment before.
It's fair. You're saying that to me kind of almost it's like almost like a
Do
spiritual kind of
you know what? There's a
side.
side to it because I've met a lot of
Yeah.
hypnotherapists, right? And you've got the ones that are like, nah, there's nothing funky going on here. It's just, it is how it is what it is. We can release trauma. Our mind's really powerful. We can release all this stuff. And then
Mm.
there's kind of the spiritual, which is like, people think that there's all sorts of things that they think are going on. I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I am quite spiritual, but I wouldn't say that I let it completely guide my
Yeah.
sessions. I like people to understand what is going on, despite, no matter what their beliefs are. And if they start talking to me about past life regression, then that's up to them. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But yeah, yeah.
That's powerful. I love these conversations. With your own journey, obviously hypnotherapy has obviously quite clearly been like the biggest kind of, I guess, coping mechanism to get you through what you went through. Was there anything else that you leaned on when things get a little bit much?
I definitely, do you know what? I have to tell myself to rein it in with the schedule. Like,
Yeah.
if things get too much, I have to learn to say no. Like, you can rearrange things so that you see people at different times and stuff. And I do like to give myself a clear run sometimes when I just need to, like, almost go in. People
Mhm.
say, like, oh, you go on in yourself or you disappear for a week. And I'm like, that's just me. Like,
Yeah.
it does
You
heal you
need
in a
that,
way.
yeah.
You need a bit of downtime, especially when you're working with people all the time. But yeah, that is, I mean, I think it's really important. How
No,
about
I
you?
I
What
know,
do you do?
I completely agree with you, and it's the reason kind of I asked it because obviously I've picked up some of my best coping mechanisms now by having these kind of conversations, whether it's journaling or, podcasts or anything like that. But I would have to agree with you, but sometimes it's almost seen in a negative way. Like you said, like, oh, you've gone in on yourself. But like sometimes I need to go in on myself to kind of understand why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. I need to kind of almost nitpick little things that have happened throughout the week to allow myself to understand why I did that, or how do I
Yeah.
not do that again, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because it is difficult. Like you have these kind of conversations like day in, day out. And imagine, obviously, I'm not a therapist, I'm not, doing anything on the level that you do, but it's quite easy to kind of get caught up in that. And if someone is having a hard time, you said it earlier about kind of like matching energy and stuff.
Mm.
Like you need to sometimes take that step away to regroup.
Yeah, I think recharging is a really big thing. Like, I can't treat people if I'm like, like
Yeah.
flat out, and I'm not going to be in the best mood to, like, spend time with my friends either. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But um I think people have different ways of coping, but for me, I definitely go in on myself. I I take some time out
Yeah.
basically, and that's, I do a lot of meditation, a lot of hypnosis, like self-hypnosis, and generally that really keeps me calm, quite
Yeah.
level-headed. Um but yeah, I do think there's a lot to be said for taking time out. And there are people that just get offended by it. Like, they really get offended by it. I'm
Mhm.
like, sorry, I can't help you.
Yeah. But you
Like,
need to help yourself, and it's I get really annoyed at people who have this kind of conversation like, "I need to be selfish." Like, it's not selfish. Like, you're giving yourself what you need.
yeah,
Like, you're just doing like, if your friend was like, "I'm really struggling," then one of the first things you say, like, "Take some time for yourself." Like, you need to put
yeah,
yourself first. So why, when it comes to us taking our own advice, like, "Oh, I can't do that, it's selfish."
I know,
It
I
makes
know.
no sense.
I do you know what? You strike me as an empath, and empaths suck at
Yeah.
it. Like, we suck
Because
at
I'll sit
saying
here and be
no.
like, "Yeah," but
We're
this is
like,
what I mean,
yeah,
and to be fair, that's an important, they're not important, isn't wait, it is important, interesting topic about the power of no. Do you I imagine you struggle to say no
yeah.
then?
Sometimes I really do, and I have to really. Do you know what? My toxic trait is I'll send a message straight back to say, yeah, 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 that's fine, and then I'm like, I
I
could have
don't
just
want
took 10 minutes and then decided, no, I don't want to do that. But I do. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
we'll do.
Like I'm talking to a mirror. Um, with obviously the whole hypnotherapy conversation, you mentioned a few times now about self hips, hips,
Yeah.
hypnosis. How does that work?
Do you know what? I can find it a little bit harder
Yeah.
because I really enjoy someone else speaking to me and doing all the work. Because when you do hypnosis and you do it on other people, you're constantly thinking, what am I going to say next? So it almost becomes like you start thinking about hypnotherapy rather than actually doing what you're supposed to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I would rather someone talk to me, and it really just sends me off. Like, whereas I talking myself into it is not as exciting. It's not
Do
as
you find it
fun.
difficult, like if you've had like a day of like, like with like your clients or whatever you kind of call them, um, to put yourself in like that state? Because imagine if you're kind of, I don't know, I don't really.
So 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 I, for example, will so they'll be sitting in the room with me, and I will basically give them the pre-talk, which I sort of spoke to you about
Yeah.
before. I explain to them like what the subconscious is, the concept of the subconscious, and explain to them about energy, and about your mind and the pressure that builds up within your mind, and at what point we need to release that, and we can do that in hypnosis. And then I explain to them what hypnosis is. So it's a deep state of focus, yeah, and it's a natural state, and I'm not going to do anything to you that you don't want to happen. Yeah, I can't make you do something you don't want to do.
Yeah.
So the theory, I suppose, is, there's a lot of people like, but how come people on the stage, they do all this funky stuff? And I'm like, they want to do it. You sit and if you look at the audience, the wife that's pushing the husband up to say, go on, get up there, husband's not going to be a good subject for hypnosis. Yeah. So I know that my dad, for example, would be really, really shit. Like hypnosis will not work on him because he doesn't want you to open Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Yeah. No offense, Dad. But he doesn't want you to open it. But some people are scared of what's going to happen. But the reality is, it allows you to release emotion and release trauma, however that may be, and it happens in generally quite an involuntary way. So people will get involuntary movements is the most common thing. So I know that when I go into hypnosis, I get a lot of leg twitches.
Okay.
Some people get involuntary speech, a little bit of involuntary speech, and there's normally a lot of twitching around the face and a lot of movement on the head. So a lot of people drop their head. That's kind of like the classic, you probably see it on telly, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
happens. People go into this deep dreamland in their mind, and they can really dig out, in their subconscious, and get really deep in there. So people just almost like
Deck
drop.
chair fold.
And yeah, so it happens. But can't remember what you asked me, to be
I
honest.
swear I can't. I was literally, I love these
A
kind of
waffle.
conversations. Yeah,
I'm waffling.
I'm the perfect show for it. We've said with the hypnosis side of things, like it helps obviously with anxiety, trauma, and stuff. There's a side to hypnosis that I think even just like if you were to Google it, can help with like weight. It can help with like smoking. It can happen
Yes.
with all these things. Like from a selfish point of view, from like I guess from like not necessarily a diet, but like from a weight point of view, how does that work?
Good question. So basically, the subconscious is your subconscious deals with things like trauma. Yeah, for example. So every single day, you're going to have probably every week you're going to have something traumatic happen to you, and then you'll have the big life events, and like I said, that trauma builds up. So actually things like weight loss, sorry, overeating, and what did you say the other one was? Oh, like
Smoking,
smoking.
yeah.
They're responses to trauma a lot of the time. So people develop a subconscious coping mechanism. I know people that bite their nails because that's their
Yeah.
mind's way of coping. People don't necessarily want to eat loads and keep eating, but a lot of the time it's a response to trauma. And when you get rid of the emotional attachments to the trauma that's happened to them, the symptoms are relieved. Does that make sense?
So it's more around it's not necessarily the thought process around like the overeating, so it's more the emotion that's attached to
Yeah,
it.
the emotion that's attached to the eating, and they won't know what that is.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, they won't know what that is. Um, and that's not to say that different people are experience different things
Mm.
with weight, and obviously there's medical conditions and things like that to consider, but generally that is a really good start point, and everyone has trauma, and your subconscious finds a way to cope. But that's not to say that people can't consciously start. If you think about this concept, right, you do, right, have you ever ridden a push bike? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So you at some point were consciously taught to ride that bike, and you had to think about how to get on it, and like, I've really got, what
Yeah.
I'm doing. But now you don't think about it. So your conscious action repeated becomes a subconscious action. So it's not to say they can't break that, but the trauma's still going to be there. So chances are they're just going to develop a new coping mechanism to that trauma. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
it
quite
is.
powerful.
It is. It is. And yeah, your subconscious is responsible for a lot. Beliefs, decision
God.
making.
Both good and bad.
I know.
Because obviously we wouldn't obviously survive, I don't think,
No,
without the subconscious.
no, not at all. And your decision making every single day. I mean, 95% of the decisions you make are done within your subconscious. You don't think about them. You just do them.
It's like remembering to breathe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Subconsciously, obviously.
Yeah. And those changes in hypnosis that happen, so those big changes, they'll happen as easy as you breathe and as easy as you blink, because that's your subconscious. And what happens is in when you're in a state of hypnosis, you're very open to suggestion. So
Yeah.
we effectively open up your subconscious and dim down your conscious mind and access all those little, like, pockets of trauma.
Wow.
Yeah. So it is quite amazing. I mean,
I'm
I remember a
yeah.
really, really good experience of hypnosis, and I'd had hypnotherapy before, and I remember thinking, oh, you know, I'm not sure, like, I want to, because at the time, this was when I was on the hypnotherapy course. I'd had all my hypnosis sessions and I was doing a course. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh, I don't really want to go into hypnosis around all these people. And then so we was doing bits on each other, and this guy said, sit in the chair, do all this, blah, blah. And I was thinking, oh, and I literally just went like, and I've never ever gone into hypnosis like that. And I just burst out crying. It was like turning on a tap, honestly. And I remember thinking, there was a part of me that was like, this is embarrassing. But the other part was like, this feels good.
Yeah.
And then
Finally, it's out.
literally, like after that, again, it was like, I obviously needed that. I haven't had hypnosis for a year. Like I haven't had hypnotherapy for a year. And after that, I started doing it to myself all the time. But it's a little bit harder, I feel.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
It's a powerful tool.
Really powerful, yeah.
Speaking of powerful tools, obviously, there's thing that keeps catching me out the corner of my eye. What is that on the floor?
Thinking, oh my god, what have I got in my
I
head?
know.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I can't believe I'm gonna explain it to you. Okay, so this is actually a really, really good way to explain to you why someone might have anxiety, right? And so if you imagine in your mind, in your brain, you've got your amygdala, which deals with your flight fight response, so
Mhm.
your threat assessment effectively. And so imagine this is your amygdala. In your brain, take that aside for a second.
Okay.
In your brain, you've got the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. And when there's conflict between those two sides of the brain, the emotion will always take over. So the left hemisphere is all to do with your logic, and the right is to do with your emotion. So when there's conflict between the two sides of the brain, the psychologist Emil Coué said that if there's conflict between the two, the emotion will always, always override the logic. So that's when you're like in an argument, you get really angry, and you're like, oh, and then you think later, I shouldn't have said that. That was an emotional reaction. And so in between those two sides of the brain is your amygdala, which deals with your threat assessment, right? And you laugh, but this is a really good, people really grasp this, right? And if you imagine this is your amygdala, what should happen is that it's on guard, and then I like throw that at you. You blink, yeah. That's a subconscious reaction. Okay, so that subconscious reaction, what's happened there is your amygdala fires up and opens up and sends cortisols, hormones, electrical impulses around your body to say, react, do something, do something. Yeah, there's a threat. And so that's a really minimal, obviously, like reaction, yeah, a minimal threat. But when that threat's cleared and gone, so there's no threat anymore, that should close back down. But what happens is, like when you've got trauma, is that it can't close back down. So it's kind of trapped here. And it's still sending all those electrical impulses, cortisols, hormones around your body to say, do something, do something. There's a threat, but there's not a threat. Yeah, it's just a trauma that's trapped, and your body thinks like something's going on. And so it's on overdrive. And that's why you get that adrenaline, that anxious feeling all the time, is because this can't close back down. So when we release the emotional attachments to the trauma that you've been through, then this can close back down and you can get a bit of clarity in your life. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
It makes perfect
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Do you know what as well? And this word I've never heard, well, obviously I've heard this word before, but I'm hearing it a lot lately, and I think it's because I'm exploring different ways of managing my anxiety, like looking at like different therapies,
Yeah.
this and that, and it all keeps coming back to the clarity word.
Clarity. Yes.
And it's like when I some guy, well, his name's Rob, he was on the show recently and he was saying, like, well, when you go to the gym and stuff, do you have a clear goal on what you want? And I was like, well, not really. I just go to the gym for the sake of going to the gym. He was like, you kind of need clarity on like what you want to be able to get to where you need to go.
Yeah.
So it's really weird because it's like this. Obviously, I struggle with
Feed.
anxiety still on a daily basis, but I think it's because I don't really have a lot of clarity. I'm not kind of exploring those things of like getting to that version of Taylor that needs to kind of exist
Yeah.
because those blockers are still
There.
there.
We'll do you a hypnosis session
Yeah.
later.
God, this is
Yes,
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But clarity is a big thing, right? Because I think without clarity, you don't have as much direction. You don't. One thing that I really notice is that if I've had a few hypnosis sessions, I've boxed away the shit that kept coming up and just reappearing, saying you're shit at this, like all those silly little
Mm.
thoughts that just intrude sometimes. They go away. Like, you've boxed them away. I've dealt with that scenario, whatever it was that was traumatic. It's done now. Stop overthinking it. And it doesn't come back. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, clarity is a good word. I love clarity.
Yeah. I feel like it's just seems to be a common theme at the moment. I think it's just because I'm more aware of it. If there was anyone listening to this who is having a bit of a tough time with it, other than kind of obviously exploring hypnotherapy, either with yourself or wherever, what advice would you give them?
What someone who's like, struggling with anxiety or
Yeah.
do you know what? I find it really, really good if I just sit there and close my eyes for like honestly a few minutes and just like let whatever comes, like whatever emotion you have, just let it be there and let it go and just almost imagine that you're letting go of it because if you can picture that, if you can feel it, chances are you can picture it, you can feel it in your body. um and it will your brain doesn't really know the difference between something that's a reality and something that you're imagining, right? So it's like when you're in your dreams, you're so immersed in it, you're like, wow, that felt really real. So we can almost like trick our brains into thinking something is happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
um so I think that's a really good technique that I use, and sometimes you'll get, I don't know, random ways of like I might picture, for example, throwing some shit in the bin and like like each one and there's something on each bit of paper, but other people have really random things like, I don't know, picture it in really random ways, but there's no right or wrong way.
Mm.
It's just I find that a really good technique just to sit there and just imagine that I'm getting rid of it, and it's done.
Yeah.
Um,
It's powerful 'cause you see, don't you, people like write on bits of paper and like they either burn it or like put in the bin. But it's almost you, it's like you can picture it, like you said, like leaving your body. Speaking of like bodies and like throwing shapes and things like that, are you a music fan?
I love a music. I love a bit of music.
Good, good, good. Because obviously we're a mental health and music podcast.
Hmm.
So I have three final questions for you that really like I feel like I love this, but this is like my favorite, not the ending, but like it's I love hearing what songs have kind of
Okay.
soundtrack the journey. What song needs to be playing to get Ellie on the dance floor?
Oh, on the dance floor. Oh God. Do you know what? I actually I love doing the moves. What's that one? Candy. I love that song.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like this is having a bit of resurgence at the minute because I think it goes in time with I can't think of what Beyonce song it is, but I
Oh
seem to be
really? You can do
for
it to
some reason
Beyonce.
it's like on my For You page on
You've been
TikTok. It's
practicing at
yeah,
home.
because there's like Jay-Z does it to like one of Beyonce songs.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that, but yeah, that is one of mine. Do you know what? I just think all the old school like
Yeah,
'90s stuff as well, which
the
just
classics.
gets me right up.
On the flip side of that, is there any songs or albums that kind of when you are having those kind of like down days and like you are sitting in your feels, does it pull the emotion out?
Yes, very weird, and you might not know this song from like if I say it to you, but you might know it if you will know it if I play it to you. Um, it's a song by Des'ree called "You Gotta Be." Do you know what it is?
I
You
do
have
know what
absolutely
it is,
no.
but this isn't the one about. Oh, hang on, I might be getting this mixed up now. But I have a problem with this song
Why?
because there's a line in this song, and I think I've got the right one, and it says something along the lines of like, "Walking in the park, I don't want to see a ghost. I'd rather have a piece of toast."
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, And
It is that one.
still, and someone said it to me once on the show, like probably like 2 years ago, and it has stuck with me. It's a banger, don't get me wrong. Like
It is a
you're right,
banger.
you've got to
Do
be.
you know, I've never read into that bit. I must just zone out on that bit.
It's the only
I
bit
do know that it's there, but I just but that is actually a good point. I mean, yeah, but you listen to a lot of songs and there's so many that resonate, and there are the occasional lyric you think you just couldn't think of anything
Yeah,
related to.
I mean,
But
I do agree with it. I'd rather eat toast than see a ghost.
it's a bit random.
Yeah, it rhymes. But then, why is that? Why does that song?
Do you know, it just is one of those songs that really lifts me up. Like, I feel like if I'm having a bit of self-doubt or lacking confidence, I'm really like, it just gets me going. And I have this theory that I died in the 70s because I've also like a lot
Oh,
of 70s music. Um, Theory. Who knows what happened? And I also am very, very drawn to like bright colours. And so I'm like,
to be fair, you did walk in. I was like, oh my god, look at all those buttons.
oh yeah, yeah, I was obsessed. I was like, rainbows. Rainbows. But yeah, there's something subconsciously that draws me to colour, and I don't know what it is. So
You're
it's
like a
like my
moth.
inner child.
A moth in a
Maybe,
previous
yeah,
life.
maybe I was. Maybe I was. Moths are dead. But yeah.
Okay, final question. If there was a song that you could put in a box, wrap in chains, kick it to the bottom of the ocean,
Oh
never
my
hear it
god.
again, what song would it be?
I actually don't know. Probably some like heavy metal stuff, you know,
Oh,
really heavy, like, I don't know. Yeah, I can't actually think of a song that I really hate, to be honest. Like, but I do think a little bit of heavy metal sometimes a bit sends me into like, um,
angry mode.
yeah, and also what's that? It kind of like it's what's it when you overcloud all your senses and all your senses feel like it's just too much, like
Yeah,
sensory overload.
overload.
It's like that. So that does that to me. So I'm like, yeah, shut that out.
No, I think you're the
Shut that
first
one out.
person who's come on here and not said Crazy Frog.
Oh my god, I forgot about
No,
that.
you've said
Crazy
it
Frog
now.
now.
No,
Yeah,
you
no.
said it now.
Yeah.
You have been brilliant to offer. I
Oh, thank
genuinely feel like I've
you.
learned so much. And I feel like there has been part of the hypnotherapy kind of stigma that has been reduced by having this conversation. And it is something that you'd be stupid not to try. You're sat here like almost like a result
Yeah.
of the work and of the hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
For anyone who's listening who, want to know more, they want to find where you not find where you are, but like where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at EJ Hypnotherapy, and same on Facebook at EJ Hypnotherapy. Also my website, www.ejhypnotherapy.co.uk. But yeah, just it's generally I would just do a free consultation to find out, if what I can help them with, and if you can work with me, and then we go from there. But yeah, I would say it's beneficial for everyone, like everyone could do with a bit of hypnotherapy if they're willing. Do you know what I mean? If they're
But I
a
think
good
it's the
subject.
same as anything, isn't it, though? With any kind of therapy, like you are going to have to put the work in.
You
I think
have
it's
to,
not
yeah.
someone can guide you, like you said, like with you can do that, like with the pre-talk and obviously the talk throughout the session. But you are going to have to put the work in.
Yeah, you have to want to change. But if you want to change and you want things to change, then it's a really, really good and fast way of doing it. It's a lot quicker than like, counselling, all that sort of stuff. So pretty good. Pretty good.
Give it a go. Give it
Yeah.
a go.
Give it a go.
Thank you for joining me for a waffle.
No worries. Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Can you put the buttons down now, please?